Welcome to Late Night Health. I'm Mark Alyn, and we are joined as we are on this special video blog of Late Night Health by Dr. Greg Celaya. Dr. Celaya is a functional medicine specialist who's a chiropractor and nutritionist. We're going to talk about something that costs about 60 cents each, maybe up to a buck. They're eggs. And we're going to do a three-part series on eggs. Dr. Celaya, welcome to Late Night Health as always.
Hey, Mark, how you doing? Hey,
I'm doing great.
Like you said, we're going to do three-part series, and this one's going to talk about how eggs are processed. The number two, we'll talk about the good things, the nutritional values of eggs, and the third, we'll talk about the not so good. So don't make your determination on eggs until you watch all three parts of the series, okay?
All right, let's talk about the processing of eggs. To me, you got a chicken, you have a rooster, you've got some feed of some kind. If they're free-range chickens, they got some worms in there, maybe some bugs, and now we got eggs. What's the process?
Well, yeah, that all sounds good, but most eggs aren't processed that way. So first you have to understand an egg. An egg can have anywhere from 7,000 to 17,000 pores. Right? People think the egg is just a shiny exterior, but it is porous. And for those that have done Easter eggs, you know that by when you color them and you break the egg open, you have color inside of your egg.
When you hard boil the egg and then dye it, pink, blue, fuchsia, whatever, you're saying that the dye actually gets into the yolk of the egg?
It doesn't necessarily get into the yolk, though it can, but it's more into the white of the egg.
Oh, okay.
If you've done Easter eggs, and I know you probably haven't.
I have not. Actually, I have made Easter eggs in the past.
All right.
Okay. We used to, what we did was we would make a small hole in one end, do a pin at the other end, the small end, and then blow, and the egg material would come out in a bowl. My mother would scramble them, and then the shells we would color.
Yeah, and that's a different way. But most people, when they do Easter eggs, they're coloring the egg, and with 17,000 pores, you know that stuff gets in, right? And the thing you have to understand is that in the United States, we process eggs different than almost the entire rest of the world, and especially the EU. So we clean and sanitize those eggs. So, for example, they need to be washed in a detergent type of spray or even a bath. And in addition to that, then they spray the actual egg with either a chlorine or quaternary ammonium on top of the egg to try and sanitize it.
That doesn't sound good because I can't even pronounce those words.
Well, think about it. I mean, they are carcinogenic in a way. I mean, they are free radicals and they can create problems, but now they're in your egg, right? Because of the pores. And so I don't know about you, but I don't want that stuff in my eggs. And so Europe does quite a bit differently. So they don't clean the eggs at all. So the farmers are really supposed to make sure that their chickens are healthy, their environment's healthy, and people will not buy dirty eggs, and they're not allowed to clean them. So they're more forced to make sure that the animal is living right and in clean environments. I don't know if you've seen videos where we produce eggs, but usually most of them, we're not talking about the free range. They're in small cages. The lights are on 24/7. They're there to lay eggs. And I don't know if you know it, but we have a season for eggs, and chickens don't lay eggs a lot in the summer or in the winter. But they're getting 24/7 production out of these chickens.
So it's not humane, for one thing.
Well, I don't think so. And
I would agree.
Yeah, everybody's a little bit different. So, they go ahead in Europe, they make sure that the eggs are not cleaned, and they don't bathe them, they don't spray them with chemicals, and they don't refrigerate them like we do.
Are all eggs, even organic eggs, sprayed with this stuff?
Well, it depends where you get your eggs from. Right. So, for example, I like to get my eggs locally from farmers that grow them here. In fact, I go to a farmer's market, and I remember having a conversation with this guy, and I said, "Hey, I'd like to come see your farm." And this guy says, you know what? Here's the address. You come over whenever you want. Don't call me ahead of time. I don't want to know you're coming. That way, you know that I'm not pulling any fast ones and changing how things are here. And so he grows, pasture raised chickens. They're all over the place, and they're eating natural things, which makes a huge difference for your health.
I mean, I can understand taking the egg and maybe wiping it off with a cloth and putting it into the carton or a box.
Yep, they're not even allowed to do that there. In fact, so for example, if you wash it with water, and the cold water can cause the contents of the egg to contract, which can bring in pollutants. And in addition to that, they're saying that the water actually can change the cuticle. The cuticle is like a layer that comes on the egg once it's out, once it's excreted from the chicken. And it's supposed to be a protective layer that minimizes bacteria that go into the egg itself. And
when eggs come out, and I don't know that, I just thought about this. Do eggs come out soft and hardened, or they come out hard? Do you know that?
I've not played with a lot of eggs the second they've come out for obvious reasons. But yeah, they come out somewhat softer. I don't know how soft they are. All I know is you hear the chickens when they're laying eggs. It's not a comfortable thing for them.
Yeah, I would think not. Also, I guess with the mass-produced chickens, they're forcing the chicken in confined, which I don't like, as we've discussed. They're not exercising. They're not walking around. They're in this little tiny cage by themselves. How many eggs can a chicken lay in a day?
I think it depends on the breed, but usually during the breeding season or the egg season, it's about one egg a day or one every other day. It really depends on the chicken. So, but here also in the States, we cool the eggs, we refrigerate them. And what happens is when you refrigerate them, like I mentioned, you cause the material inside to contract, and it can suck in bacteria and other toxins as well. So the big problem is once you cool it, you always have to cool it. There's a problem with the chain of manufacturing and distribution, that it has to be cooled once it's cooled. And if you go to Europe, they're on a normal shelf. They like to keep them about 68 degrees, but they don't cool them the way that we do.
And how long will they stay on a shelf at 68, 70 degrees?
It's debatable. Our country says they'll last about 21 days before they start to see an increase in bacteria. But that's because we've changed the egg by all the processing, by all the chlorine and the ammonium and how we process it and soak it in water. And theoretically, the temperature of the water has to be, a few degrees hotter than the egg. And does that really happen? Otherwise, it contracts and we increase pollutants. And so there's so much to consider. But I really like the way that Europe and the rest of the world deals with eggs. We've changed it all because we're bacteria resistant, so to speak, and we've created so many issues as a result of it. So in other words, you get those 17,000 pores, and now you have toxins inside of your eggs when you shouldn't have them inside of your eggs.
Well, you're suggesting that people can get sick and do get sick from eating eggs that have high bacterial content.
Absolutely, they do. But if you treat the egg right, you're going to have no issues, number one. Number two, if you cook the egg right, you're not going to have any problems, right? I mean, I've eaten raw eggs before, and I've eaten plenty of them and never gotten sick. But for most people, you have to cook the egg the right way to minimize that toxin or bacteria.
And this is, bless my mother. I didn't like eggs growing up because she made them too well done. And then I discovered runny yolks. And so the egg is actually, I guess, undercooked. And while, you can eat things like hollandaise sauce, which is egg yolk and some kind of oil, or a béarnaise, which is the same kind of a thing, and they're undercooked. It tastes better than when you cook the egg.
Well, in one of our future videos, we're going to talk about that as well as how much should you cook an egg. But there was research done in England, and they took caged eggs and they tested them for salmonella. And they found 23% of those eggs had salmonella, where if you took organic flocks, you had a 4.4%, and free range flocks had 6.5%. So just caging them makes a huge difference in the salmonella toxicity levels.
The eggs that were tested in the UK, was that done in the UK, or was that done on American eggs?
No, that was in England.
It was in England.
But you have to understand the EU has different ways of dealing with eggs, like I mentioned.
Right. And are there any statistics on bacterial content of eggs, especially things like salmonella, that can be fatal?
Well, that was on salmonella.
Right. But are there any studies done on American eggs?
You know, I haven't seen those studies at this point. I don't know if they would release those. But if the eggs are done right, I'm not worried about salmonella. And you cook your egg, you shouldn't have a problem. Now, salmonella can be in the egg already, right? It doesn't have to come from the outside. And so it's just a matter of making sure they're cooked right to minimize that issue. You know, commercial eggs have less nutritional values and they have hormones and antibiotics. And so, you know, you have to understand how eggs are treated. And usually they're fed diets of corn, soy, and cottonseed. And so when you have naturally grown chickens, eating the vegetable content and the different things out there make a big difference to the health of the egg. And have you ever eaten natural eggs or free range eggs, Mark? Have you eaten those recently?
Absolutely. And in fact, I was in Europe not long ago, and the yolk of the egg is bright, almost an orange.
It's a whole different story, and it stands up different. The shell is a lot harder to crack. I mean, I like cracking eggs with one hand, right? Like the old, I don't know who was that. Was that Julia Childs or whatever? I don't know.
Right. 2 eggs and...
But you can't do that with a good egg. It doesn't work, right? The shells are too tough. In addition to, if you grow the chicken right, or you feed them the right thing, you want to make sure they're fed non-GMO grain. And the problem with GMO is not only we don't know what the weird GMOs are going to do, but with GMOs, they're able to spray toxic chemicals on that crop a week before they process it. So now, in addition to the hormones and antibiotics, you're getting pesticides as well in your food.
I thought that the FDA prohibited chickens from having hormones and antibiotics. In fact, it says that on chicken packages.
It may say it on chicken packages, but I don't think it says it on egg packages.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. What else can you tell us about the processing of eggs?
I know that there's so many issues involved with it. I don't want commercially grown eggs myself. There's certain companies that do commercially grow eggs that are really conscious as far as what the chicken eats, how it's processed, in addition to where they're grown, right? I want chickens that are out wild, they're doing and they're eating what they need to eat. I'm not so concerned about the toxicity levels when you have those types of chickens, you know, in the eggs. It's when you get into more of the commercially grown ones for mass production. And, you know, eggs are cheap. Healthy eggs are not as cheap, right? They're probably twice, maybe 3 times the price. And I understand why. And I'll tell you what, we're going to talk more about how many you should eat and all the rest of that stuff. But eggs are great food for some people, not for others. And we'll talk about that as well.
All right. We'll do that on our next episode. I do know that I had some friends who had about 20 chickens, and they would give me eggs. And they told me, now I understand why, they put them in a carton, an old egg carton, and say, don't refrigerate these. Just leave them on your counter.
Yeah. And did you do that? And how long did it last?
Well, not long, because we ate them.
Yeah. And you didn't get sick, did you?
No, did not.
No.
Did not. Well,
so, you know, they're mainly doing it because there is a huge time difference between when these eggs are harvested, because they're so commercially grown, as to when people eat them, right? They could be a long time before you get to eat them.
A couple of weeks.
It could be. And at that point, you're increasing your contamination rates substantially. So they're trying to minimize that in the long term. But me, I want eggs that are laid as fast as I want to eat them as fast as possible after they've been laid.
Dr. Celaya, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it. If you want some information on eggs and genetically modified organisms and all kinds of health issues, visit drcelaya.com. That's drcelaya.com, drcelaya.com. And also visit us at latenighthealth.com, latenighthealth.com. For Dr. Celaya, I'm Mark Alyn. We'll see you next time.